Yes, for AM Talk on the AM show, a lady and a gentleman. I have Horace Ni Ankra. What's the right word? Which one starts first? Ni Horace Ankra?
No, Horace Ni Ankra. But I've been coming down here. So
Horace Ni Ankra. You're from Labadie?
No, Otublohum.
Where's that?
Otublohum. Yes, in Accra. Jamestown. Right?
Okay. He's a former UK Ireland chairman. Okay. Was it cholera when you were in the
UK? Cholera, no. I mean, in this 21st century, I think when you go to places like the UK, USA, and those places, no, you didn't find cholera.
All right. And Rodalyn Imoro Ayana, and Rodalyn is the first vice chairwoman. Okay, second vice chairwoman. Wanted to increase her post for the CPP.
No.
She doesn't want any more posts. Okay, so that's how it goes. Now, please, let's comment our discussion with UTAG ending a strike action late yesterday. They now had to sign an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, and notably, it's been agreed that now they'll rescind their decisions to continue their strike action. And that's good news for the university students. I start with you, Horace.
Yeah, okay. Yes, it is good news. Each time you hear any organization going on strike or threatening to go on strike, it's a sign of maybe parties not doing their best to reach a decision to address certain issues. It happened with so many entities in the last, year. I think we've seen or we've witnessed a time in this in our history where strike actions have actually become very, very, very common. Is it a matter of that we don't have good negotiators or what? So if it has come to this point that UTAG is calling off their strike action so that campuses will get back into action, then it's good news for all of us. And we should actually sit now and look at what is happening with, let's say, the education sector, where POTAG goes on strike, UTAG will go on strike. I mean, it disturbs the calendar. And when the calendar is disturbed as such, then it's, I mean, academically, academic year is not like 12 months. Academic year is like 9 months.
It's almost like
you understand?
9 months. Yeah.
Yes.
Because there are 3 terms in the year for the basic schools.
Yeah. So when you have situations where kids will have to go sit home over petty issues because a reason wasn't given for a decision taken, that I believe should stop. So it's good news for us this morning.
But the point is, why is it that we're not very much proactive? We're always very reactionary to subjects of national importance. As decision makers, these should be prime concerns.
Good morning to our viewers. That's actually what's supposed to happen. We're supposed to be proactive. We're supposed to prioritize our needs. But unfortunately, that is not what we are seeing. I am happy that UTAG has decided to go back to work. Coming also, this information we've had that 28% are the only people that qualify to go into our tertiary institutions, and 72% of our children failed. And you ask yourself, who are they going to teach anyway? Because the bulk of our children are going to stay at home. I don't know, but I think that strikes are becoming one too many in this country. It sometimes makes you wonder if we are becoming a bit intolerant, you know, as professionals, or if it is that our governments are becoming insensitive to our needs as professionals. Because when you look at the way things have gone, it's been forth and coming, and all has to do with one allowance or some benefit and all that. So somehow, I think that it's about time we really looked at education, because this is what is actually affecting the quality of education. When you have teachers leave the classrooms and sit at home, and students are also at home doing nothing, when they do get back, there are some things that you forget, and you have to pick up, and it's like you need to do extra work. So it is not easy, especially when it has to do with university education, where there's a lot involved, more research needed, more classwork, more practical things. You need to be always in the classroom. But if you have to sit at home, that's not the best. And coming to look at POTAC, they are even threatening again that they might go back. Even though they've gone back to class, they want to strike again because they haven't received their August salaries, which for me is neither here nor there. Because government did negotiate with you. You should have made that an issue before actually agreeing to go back. If you knew that you were not going to go because of August, you should have made government aware that yes, we've sat, we've discussed, and we've negotiated with you, but we need to get our salaries. Now we are being told that non-teaching staff have been paid, but teaching staff have not been paid. And they are also threatening to go back again.
Because non-teaching staff didn't embark on strike.
That's it. Non-teaching staff did not embark on the strike. And then also the strike was supposed to have been illegal. So if you went to negotiate, you should have pressed on that issue, that government had frozen your salaries and you didn't understand why, and therefore you should have negotiated to be able to rectify that before going back.
So that all be part of the negotiations.
All of it will be part of the negotiations.
Now, Horace, do you think that professionals in this country, and especially those perceived, well, in the labor law, we have those that have been categorized essential, but even those that also tend to be essential outside the labor law and know it, tend to abuse and always tie the hand of government, I mean, literally?
Yeah, so, I mean, you look at what you've just said in another context, you ask yourself, is it time for us to look at or change our strike laws? You understand? Because I think that, just as my good lady said, some of these things are not called for. I mean, at the end of the day, like I said earlier, do we not have good negotiators when it comes to these things? But I think that what we need now is to look at our strike laws, because at the end of the day, I think some of these entities, when they want to embark on strike, they don't actually get the right percentage of the people to vote to say, yes, we are going on strike. Is it the number of people present at a particular time
who will take the decisions for the majority?
Who will take the decision, or the total, a certain number out of the total? You get me? Or is it, what is it?
But how would you also not know that perhaps the entire membership are willing to go on strike just because they feel that they have genuine grievances?
I think in this country we don't even have that. I think in this country, when the big guns meet and then they decide to go on strike, they say we're representing everybody and we think we have to go on strike. But I think that the membership in itself, for example, they should have something like, if you don't come up with, let's say, 75% of membership voting to say, yes, we want to go on strike, it should be illegal. You understand? Recently, you remember that there was a call that POTAC workers should lose their salary and stuff like that.
That is the members of POTAC.
Yeah. It's one of the consequences of you going on strike. You understand? I think that it's about time that we look at our strike laws in this country.
Actually, the labor law duly it has that very inherent regulation that says that after a certain number of days, you have to pay yourself. You forfeit.
Yeah.
So you the union then will have to pay your membership, so to speak. So if you know you don't have the finances, so you forfeit it. But it's also because for a cause. Now, over the period, we've seen a resurgence of organized unions, always not necessarily holding government to ransom, but always very quick to jump the gun and say we want to go on strike. Is it a sense of perhaps a lack of trust in leadership?
I would not want to agree with my colleague here,
Horace.
Yes, Horace, that we need to look at strike laws. I think that as a government, we need to prioritize the very things that we think are important. Education is important. When you come up with a condition that you have not kind of like talked it over with members of the group that you're going to deal with, and just come up and say, look, this is what we intend to do, definitely you're going to have a backlash. Somebody's going to say, I don't want it. So what we need to do rather is that I think government must be proactive. If you intend to do any changes in any one situation, you have to negotiate with that person first, at least sit around and say, look, this is what we, if they had gone out of their own way to negotiate, to discuss with UTAG and POTAC about book allowances and the likes, these things would not, the strikes would not have come, because it is important for us to recognize that the labor law does give the workers the opportunity and the right to choose people to represent them. You therefore cannot go out and call people and say, look, we want to have your support before we go out there. They talk to their leadership in their various unions, and they come out and say, look, we are going to do, this is what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to negotiate with government on behalf of our workers or their unions. And therefore, if we start trying to stifle them from going on strikes, which is their constitutional rights, then it means that we are going to get people sitting back and actually not doing anything. Because I can decide not to go on strike, but decide to come to the classroom and not teach, which is even worse. Because you might not be able to know what is happening in the classroom. If teachers decide to go and sit behind the door somewhere and say that, look, they're not going to give us this, they are being difficult, and therefore let's just go and go slow. So we go teaching the same thing, you know. Oh, take your books, open page 22, all of you read, and they sit back.
At the end of the day, who loses?
At the end of the day.
It's also a stress on the teacher to catch up and make sure that...
but the teacher does not lose in the sense that at the end of the month he collects his pay. This is the one thing that you see, when you look, if you go to the classroom, we as a people, I keep saying that one of these days, we as parents will have to hit the streets to actually demonstrate against teachers, you know, who collect money at the end of the month. And then when our children go out to write BECE, they come out with 0. No one has ever asked the teacher.
I get your point, but Horace, would we come to a point in time in our country where public opinion doesn't always follow what the politics in the public discourse is, but rather actions are taken by responsible people who would not always be blaming political leadership or public servants for actions that are taken that are also inimical to whether they are various sectors, whether they are children who are in schools or patients who are in the hospitals, etc. So these class actions then will be taken by the citizenry, exerting a lot more accountability and responsibility.
Well, partly right, but before I answer that, I would like us to actually answer this. I mean, when you go out there in the West or in Europe, would you have a strike action without people actually balloting? It is not about the executive, the selected, and I don't want us to sort of like restrict ourselves to education here. But when you go to these more advanced countries, fine. The big guns are there who lead these various unions, but the membership would actually vote. Enough time is given to management, or government, to say that down the line in about 3 months' time, we are going to go on strike because of A, B, C, D. And it is not just the executive of the union, that the executive of the union will actually meet the other side to be negotiating stuff. But to call for a strike action, membership, a percentage of membership should actually ballot. Now, when you go to these places, if that does not happen, then even the strike action is illegal. You understand?
That is if you don't get the needed quorum.
Yes, it's a strike. Yes,
serious decisions.
Yes,
on
it is illegal. So that is why I'm calling for such reforms, so that at least before a strike action is taken, we will know that yes, it has some grounds. I'm not saying that certain things shouldn't be addressed or seen to, But I think it will help.
On the substantive, now UTAG yesterday, prior to the signing of the MOU, had initially agreed, walked out and come back to. The reason why they walked out was the fact that they wanted a clause or a phrase that was in the MOU that stated that there was going to be some level, I think, scrapping of the book and research allowance that currently they enjoy, and they wanted it put in place. Of course, the reports are saying that somehow they've come to a truce, and so that has been inserted back. Or it means that we're going to have concurrent payments of access of a research fund and payment of allowances. You get the point. So in the payroll, you have allowances for book and research, whilst we have a central fund. And how does it work?
No,
are we being fair to it?
I wouldn't know how that would work, because I would have thought that the central fund would have taken care of the book allowance and whatever. But if we're going to have a book allowance and then a central fund, then I don't see how it's going to work. One of them will have to give way for the other. So I don't know the issues that were discussed or negotiated for by UTAG. So we cannot actually know whether the central fund is going to come at a later date or they're asking for their monies for previous
Now we're told
allowances.
that it has to be discussed at the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission in line with their conditions of service. And that's been always the argument.
That has been the argument.
Okay, Mr. Horace Sankra, how come we have an employer like government negotiating to a certain point where allowances are said to be part of emolument necessarily, when it should be because you offer the service, and that's why you are getting it? Now it's almost as if I have to earn it because I feel it's a right.
You see, we're having these problems because no reason was given for a decision taken. You understand? Now, these book allowance and stuff like that are part of what do you call it? Conditions of service for these lectures.
Yeah, they said it was part of their conditions of service.
So you can't take it away from them just like that, can you? You can't, because before I got employed, these are the conditions. So if conditions are going to change, then you have to call me, give me a good reason.
That's exactly what I was saying.
And then you change the condition. You understand? Now, if you go out there, even before you change those conditions, then probably you're going to make it up elsewhere for me to stay in the job.
So there should be some markup somewhere.
Yes. So the problem has just been that there wasn't any good reason given for that decision. Now, having said that, as a country to move forward, research work is one of the important things that you have to look at. So I believe that it is a very good thing that government is trying to set up a general research fund, so that anybody at all who has anything to do to help us move forward as a nation can actually access it, get some funding, and then take up his or her research work. So there's a dichotomy to it. A research fund, I believe in it, is a very, very good thing to do, because you look at the advanced countries.
That's what they do.
That's what they do. The universities and governments are quite close, unlike in Africa, where you have universities and governments
Fighting each other.
very much far apart.
You understand? So that is very, very good. But I certainly believe that we could have done better than just trying to take that book and whatever allowance.
So it means that somehow they need to negotiate and put it somewhere for the tertiary teachers.
Yeah, but the reasons they were given, I quite remember that the reasons government was given, or the Deputy Minister for Education was given, was that some people who were not qualified, like transport officers and the likes, were all accessing the
because you're part of the overall negotiation. That's what's on it.
And that has to be looked at.
I guess it's one of the arguments.
It's one of the
because
arguments.
the argument that's also been posited by the Ministry of Education is that it's not every lecturer
who's supposed to collect the allowance.
that undertakes research in a certain way. I mean, when you're talking about research, you know that you read and you do some level of research and come and teach students. But they all say that all those things that they do also involve some level of research. Now,
no, but you ask yourself, do you need to go through all these? It's just like getting rid of ghost names. Yes, that's all you have to do. If, let's say, she is not entitled to research allowance and she's getting it, then certainly for that budget, that's a ghost name in there.
That's it.
Yes.
Shouldn't
So
be there.
so
It's
so
illegal.
just get rid of names. You understand? And then make
Unless
sure
they come out with good reasons as to why they think that they should be getting a research allowance.
Yeah.
Because you just also cannot just go getting out the names unless you call them. You know, you have to sit and tell them, you are not doing this, unless they can tell you that this is what we also use the research allowance for, maybe. Who knows?
Okay.